I'm John Little, and this is the ShockCast.
Altitude, velocity, light. 8.5 down, 220 feet. 15 forward. 11 forward, coming down nicely.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
The darkness in mankind often manifests itself in a hatred of the weak and the different. Human history overflows with oppression, genocide, and slavery. Our past is full of mass murder and repression. No excuse seems too minor when a group of people is too different and too weak to defend themselves. Just look at how humanity has treated the Jews. Why have we hated them so much? It makes no sense, but that shouldn't keep us from trying to understand why humanity is so full of such awful darkness. Whenever I have to deal with anti-Semites like Chuck Baldwin, I am forced to look again at the insane hatred that people like him have for the Jews. Yes, I know that they claim that they aren't against the Jews and are merely against Zionism, but Zionism is just the expressed desire for the Jews to live in peace and safety in their own country. So to claim that anti-Zionism isn't anti-Semitism is a lie. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, period. Israel's sovereignty over all the land by international law is set and firm. But maybe you aren't so certain. So let me step away from our main topic and address this. Israel was given their land fairly and legally. The additional land that they obtained while defending themselves was also obtained legally under international law. If you doubt this, there's an in-depth discussion of how every bit of land controlled by Israel is legally under international law. It is called Jerusalem Sovereignty by Gauthier. Dr. Jacques Gauthier is an acknowledged expert in international law and clearly demonstrates Israel's right to all of the land that she currently controls. Therefore, all claims by anti-Zionists are completely and utterly false. A lie. But what about the Palestinians? You mean that there are some who claim that they are being mistreated? Like all convicted criminals in prison, Palestinians claim that they've been unjustly incarcerated or mistreated. They may have an interesting story, but we aren't stupid. Except for a few isolated cases, the criminals in jail belong in jail. The same goes for the Palestinians. Israel has a right to rule over all of the land of Israel, including Gaza, Judea, Samaria, and the Golan Heights. The law is clear and has been verified, and I am a personal witness to the fact that the Israelis do not treat the Palestinians unfairly. Do the Palestinians get hurt and killed? Yes, in the same way that criminals and morons who engage in armed robbery suffer harm when their victims defend themselves. Time and time again, I have seen the Palestinians act like complete morons, destroying their own society, economy, and future because they hate Israel more than they love their children, their families, and even their own lives. And they have specifically said so numerous times. They'll cut off their nose to spite their face every chance they get. Again, if you are an anti-Zionist, you are an anti-Semite. There can be no other conclusion after you have examined the facts. So let's ignore anti-Zionism and look just at the foul stupidity of anti-Semitism. So, why do people hate the Jews? I know, it must be the skin color. Everybody knows the Jews are white and brown and olive and even some East Asian. Is there anything about their appearance that would make someone hate them? No, of course not. The only way that you can actually tell if someone is Jewish is if they tell you. Jews come in all shapes and sizes and colors, everything from blonde-haired, blue-eyed Viking types to the rich tones of Africa. And yes, even East Asia, where the Kaifeng Jews came from. And as I write this, there is a statue not far from where I sit that commemorates a legendary general from the Ming Dynasty. That general was Jewish and very Asian. So, the Jews aren't hated because they look different. Is it how they dress? A friend of mine told me about seeing two men meet for the first time. One an Amish man, the other Jewish and ultra-Orthodox. Both men look remarkably similar in their archaic clothes and styles that were over 200 years old. And both men nodded at each other in appreciation for their dedication to tradition. Are the Amish hated as much as the Jews are? No, of course not. Although if you've ever been stuck behind one of those horse-drawn buggies in Amish country, you might get really annoyed with them. So it's not their clothes. Do they smell bad? No. Is their behavior worse than other people? Well, allow me to dip into my own personal history. I spent many years as a Gentile among the Jews in the most Jewish city on planet Earth. You cannot get more Jewish than Jerusalem, yet I was treated better by my Jewish neighbors in Jerusalem than by my non-Jewish neighbors when I returned to the USA. If we were to go by my experience alone, the Jewish people are a far, far better group of people than any other except for real Christians. False Christians are almost universally awful. But you don't need to take my word for it. Just think about where Jewish ethics and morality come from. Yes, there is some Babylonian mysticism mixed in there, which comes to the Jews via their Talmud, but the foundation of Jewish ethics and morality have their basis in the 613 laws of the Old Testament. Therefore, it is reasonable to assume that they would make for good neighbors. And when you look at how well the Israeli Arabs have been treated in Israel, it's clear that this is the case. Oh, you don't know how the Israeli Arabs are treated? Well, let me say this. If you were an Arab and wanted to live in a place with the best health care, the most freedom, and the greatest standard of living for Arabs, and if you wanted to live in the Middle East, you would definitely want to live in Israel. In no other place in the Middle East are the Arabs treated so well by their own government. By the way, this doesn't mean that every Jew is great and wonderful. They are human beings, and that means that they are prone to foolishness, stupidity, and sin, just like any other human being. And please remember that this is also a group of people who do not know Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. So it would be unreasonable for us to set a Christian standard for their conduct. Again, during my time in Israel, I was treated very well, even though it was clear that I was as Jewish as a ham sandwich. So, we've eliminated appearance, smell, and behavior. That leaves us with only one thing left: religion. What is it about Judaism that causes people to hate the Jews so much? Both of my grandfathers were devout anti-Semites, and one of them always grumbled about the one thing that drove him nuts: the Jews stick together. Martin Luther started out with a profound affection for the Jewish people, but when they refused to convert to Christianity, Luther chose to hate them. The same thing happened with the false prophet Muhammad when he moved from Mecca to Medina. Muhammad thought that the Jews of Medina would join him, but they refused, so he murdered them. All of them. Both Martin and Muhammad hated the Jews. Why? Because they refused to convert to their religions. Someone once told me that there is a kind of rock that local Arabs in Jerusalem refer to as Jewish head, because it's apparently as hard as a Jewish head. Since I cannot confirm that statement, I leave it for you to decide whether it is true or not. But one thing is true: the Jews are known for their stubbornness in refusing to convert to other religions. Just look at the Jews of the Middle East. For 2,000 years, they have steadfastly refused to convert to Christianity and then to Islam. You could kill them, persecute them, tax them into poverty, and they still would refuse to join your religion. And yes, that's exactly what's happened to them. How annoying. Allow me a moment to get sidetracked by an important point, one that Christians need to understand. I'm always amused by the reaction that many Christians have when they find that the Jews refuse to have anything to do with Christianity. I don't know why Christians are shocked to find that Jews are antagonistic towards the idea of following Christ. The rabbis worked very hard to erect a huge spiritual barrier between Judaism and Christianity. Why? Because Judaism and Christianity were so similar. So the rabbis were afraid that the Jewish people would become Christian. And they were right to be afraid because lots and lots of Jews have become Christian over the past 2,000 years. And I have seen that fear in the many friends that I have who are religious Jews. I actually find it sad that the rabbis felt the need to distort their own religion to protect their followers from converting to Christianity. But on the other hand, it also meant that the Jewish people were preserved so that they could act as a symbol and a sign for the last days. If the rabbis had not engaged in such a distortion, and if the Jews had not been so stubborn, there wouldn't be any Jews around to return to the land of Israel. The only other group that comes close to the Jews in being so stubborn are the Romani people, also known as the Gypsies, who came from northern India 1,500 years ago. And as a note, the Romani or the Gypsies are also known as the Roma, where the name Romania comes from. But is this stubbornness the real answer? Of course not. Yes, God gave them hard heads and stubborn hearts, but he also worked to preserve the Jews in such a way that they would also survive. In one sense, you might even say that the hatred and persecution of the Jews was a way for God to keep them separate from those around them. In fact, the one thing that has done the most damage to the Jews today is the lack of persecution in North America and Europe. Because Jews today have found acceptance in our modern society, most of them have begun to drift away from Judaism. Today, most Jews are like most Christians, indistinguishable from those around them. They'll go to synagogue on Yom Kippur, have a family dinner on Passover, and light candles on Hanukkah. But that's about it. Oh, and let's not forget Satan. He hates the Jews. He wants them dead and destroyed, and if he can't kill them, he'll do his best to subvert them to his own demonic designs. But like this story of Job, God built a hedge about the Jews that allowed Satan to do only so much and no more than that. Ultimately, it comes down to Satan's struggle with God and God's plan for how the last days will play out. Why God has laid out the events of the last days like this is a mystery to me. Yes, I know what will happen, and God does provide some explanation for a few things that would happen in the last days. But the core, the central reason, God doesn't tell us, so we will ponder this until we see him in the life to come. As for Satan, it should be clear about what he is up to. He wants to derail the events of the last days in any way possible. And destroying the Jews would fit perfectly with his plans. Unfortunately for him and his foul designs, that is the one thing that he has been unable to do. So I get some of the reasons why groups of people would have a strong bias against the Jews, but frustration with Jewish stubbornness does not do anything to explain the real hatred that some people have for the Jews. I suspect that you need to drill down to the individual level to see the root cause of why there is such insane hatred. Just like there is a difference between macroeconomics and microeconomics, there is a difference between groups of people who hate the Jews and the individuals in such groups. I surmise that Chuck Baldwin hates the Jews because they represent for him an astonishing and embarrassing personal failure. He was caught in a huge error called dispensationalism, and the feelings of embarrassment and humiliation caused him to hate the Jews, a people that feature prominently in dispensationalism. At least, that appears to be the reason on the surface. And it's my interpretation of what he said, but I personally believe that the real reason is the darkness in Chuck's soul that has poisoned his view of the world. There is no way that Chuck can have such antipathy towards the Jews and towards Israel and still be a Christian. If you have bad feelings towards Israel or the Jews or both, there is something deeply, spiritually wrong with you. But what about those who hate the Jews who are not Christian? 2 weeks ago, as I waited for all the server changes to populate the internet and bring Omega Shock back online, I decided to use some of that idle time to see just how racist Gab was. I had signed up to that alternative to Twitter, but I hadn't done anything with my account. So in the interest of science, I decided to drop a bomb in the free speech group. I had surmised that all the racists on Gab would definitively and definitely have been a member of that group, and I was right. Here was my post. Quote, "I would like to take this free speech moment to tell every white nationalist that he's, usually a he, a complete moron, a shoe-size IQ, dumber than a box of rocks, and a bag of hammers. If you think that race matters, you need to stop doing drugs." Close quote. The explosion was magnificent. It had been a long time since I'd had that much fun twisting tails, pressing buttons, and causing general mayhem for such complete morons. The firestorm was impressive. The bottom line? After 31 likes, 385 dislikes, and ton after ton of hate mail, I can confidently confirm that Gab is full of racists who hate the Jews with a complete and total passion. And you can verify my claim by looking at what the Internet Traffic Analysis website Alexa says about Gab. You can find Alexa's Internet Traffic Analysis of Gab.com here. It's at alexa.com/siteinfo/gab.com. A massive amount of traffic into Gab.com comes from the Daily Stormer, the most popular neo-Nazi site on the Internet. And when you go to that foul website, wow, the hatred of the Jews is shocking. They want the Jews dead, and they want them dead right now. Oh, and to give you an idea of just how much they want the Jews dead, the name of that website and publication is derived from a pre-war and during the war German newspaper allied with the Nazi Party. That Hitler-era German newspaper was called Der Stürmer. That should give you a pretty good idea of just how much the morons at the Daily Stormer hate the Jews. But why do they hate the Jews so much? Maybe I should stop beating around the bush and get to the point. Well, let me try to answer that question by taking a stroll down memory lane and pointing out your time in elementary school. What was it like? From my own experience in public school in the 1970s, if you were overly enthusiastic or just plain enjoyed learning, you often found yourself in conflict with those who did not. And those who were a little too different ran afoul of the pack mentality that all little kids have. And packs demand conformity and uniformity. The one that I remember most was the physically adept and coordinated versus the completely inept and clumsy. Guess which one I was on. But what was especially hard to deal with were the kids from troubled homes who became bullies, demonstrating their angst and insecurity by attempting to dominate those they deemed weaker than themselves. Public elementary schools are a brutal laboratory of the human condition. Every kind of stratification and hierarchy is visible, especially on the playground. It is humanity at its most unvarnished. Children at that age lack the sophistication to create masks that we adults hide behind. So elementary school is chock full of candid and undisguised humanness. Now, let's focus even further. What about those bullies? Every school and age rank has them. They are the unfortunates from bad homes, dysfunctional parents, and broken families. Parental alcoholism, drug addiction, or just plain neglect results in children with low self-esteem and hearts that are full of bitterness and loathing. And they will invariably seek to assuage their pain by dominating the weak, by abusing those who they deem unable or insufficiently able to defend themselves. And these bullies grow up into adults who seek for ways to make other people suffer. I say all that because I have noticed a common characteristic in both the playground bully and the anti-Semite. Both are looking for ways to transfer their angst and pain onto others. Because they feel hurt, they wish to make others hurt. And because they are cowards at heart, they wish to prey upon those who are weak. And the anonymity provided by the internet only gives these repellent and odious people a sense of invulnerability. From the safety of the shadows, these morons are free to tear apart anyone that they wish. And they are, without exception, morons. I'm not just name-calling here. No, I really mean moron. They are people who tend to be undereducated and mentally deficient. Most have barely enough skill to repeat the lies and hoaxes shared by websites like the Daily Stormer. Sorry. You can see this in action when you look at Hitler's early support in Nazi Germany. The bullies and thugs who were drawn to Hitler's banner in the 1920s and 30s were all looking for something that would make them feel strong while giving them the excuse to oppress those who weren't. That bully mentality was fertile ground for the Nazi Party, and if they didn't have the Jews to attack, they would have found someone else to oppress and trample. Remember the Gypsies? The Romani people that I mentioned before? They were persecuted also and murdered by Hitler. Anyone who was weak was fair game for the Nazi psychopaths, and yes, those at the very top directing the minions were the psychopaths and sociopaths that tend to rise to the top of such organizations. No lie was too small. No distortion was too large. The Jews were the perfect target of the Nazi Party, and for those of you living in America, the Nazis had a strong following in the U.S. My maternal grandfather was one of them. Henry Ford, the founder of the Ford Motor Company, was another one, and he was such an ardent supporter of Hitler that Adolf Hitler had a life-size portrait of Henry Ford in his personal office. Nazism had such a universal appeal back in the pre-war years that it transcended language and culture. The French, the Austrians, the Spanish, the Italians, the Persians, the Arabs, and even the British, all of them, and so many more, loved Hitler's message. The Persians loved the message so much that the king of Persia, also known as the Shah, changed the name of his country to Iran in 1935 because he believed Hitler's propaganda about the superiority of the Aryan race. The desire to be superior is extremely common, and anti-Semitism gives the morons of our society the sense of supremacy and prestige that they crave. So they can't survive the battlefield of ideas. They can't survive the battlefield of ideas, so they retreat to the thuggish and moronic sanctuary of racism and hatred of the Jews. So in addition to Satan and his minions, we have mentally crippled morons seeking the destruction of the Jews because it's the only way for them to gain a feeling of importance and significance. I really believe that it is that simple. But since I cannot claim to understand everything about this revolting subject, please feel free to add your own thoughts and ideas in the comment section. I really do value constructive input, and if your comment is good enough, you might find yourself quoted in one of my articles later. Well, I've gone on pretty long, so let me summarize what I've said. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, since it denies the right of the Jews to self-defense and their right to live in their own land in peace and safety. And yes, Israel has the right to every square inch of ancient Israel according to international law. My personal experience with the Jewish people is that they are far more truthful and honest than any other non-Christian or even Christian group of people. The Jews have a higher standard of morality because that morality has a foundation in the Bible. One part of the reason why the Jews are hated is because they refuse to convert to the dominant religion of the era and area. Stubbornness is a very Jewish quality, just as it is with most Baptists. Satan wishes to destroy the Jews. God has promised to bring the Jews back into their land and back to himself. Satan wants to stop that. Anti-Semitism appeals to bullies of all shapes and sizes, and Hitler built upon that tendency when he began leading the German Nazi Party in 1921. The Nazi mentality lives on in publications like the Daily Stormer, which is modeled after Der Stürmer of the Nazi era. The bullies among us will always hate those who seem weak. A certain kind of mental midget will always pour out their internal angst and frustration upon those who are unable to defend themselves. It is sickeningly human and a worldwide phenomenon. I believe that all of this is a reflection of the darkness in humanity and a part of why many of us consider the Jews to be a kind of canary in the coal mine. How a society treats the Jewish people tells us how healthy that society is. When the Jews are badly treated, the bullies and psychopaths are in charge. And right now, anti-Semitism is growing around the world, and even in our churches. Get ready for serious trouble in the all-too-near future. Hey, you like that video, right? Great. Click like and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified. Then go to the next level. Subscribe to the Shock Letter at theshockletter.com and follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Now, read my book, Ezekiel's Fire, at ezekielsfire.com. Why? Because Ezekiel's Fire is coming.